Welcome everyone to another JW's Old Comic Corner podcast. If you noticed or seen it or even cared, hope you noticed the title change. It was suggested I do something different, so I thought I'd change it up a little bit. Hope you like it. Anyway, let's get to this. When comic book fans discuss the great Batman artists, older names like Neal Adams, Jim Aparo, to name a few, and newer names like Kelly Jones, Greg Capullo, Frank Miller, are often mentioned also. But there was another artist whose work defined the Dark Knight for thousands of readers during the late Bronze Age. A man whose career was cut tragically short at just the age 49 years old. This man's name was Don Newton. I will be going over his life and his climb to his runs on Batman and Detective and the many other comic books, of course, that he did. I will present images, original art with finished pages, if possible, during the run. I will also try to put more after the podcast, but we'll wait and see how this works out. But at the end, definitely will be a full bibliography of his work, and that will give you a chance, if you decide you like some of the stuff, you can have a place to go look for it. When you hopefully go to your local comic store. So let us begin to explore Don Newton and his life and, of course, his great artwork. Don Newton was born on November 12, 1934 in St. Charles, Virginia. When Don was just 4 years old, he was diagnosed with asthma. Because of his condition, his family was forced to relocate to Arizona in the hopes that the drier climate would probably help dry up or take care of his asthma, because that's pretty bad. My kid had childhood asthma too. It was there that a young Don Newton discovered his passion for drawing. Like many artists of his generation, comic books became one of his greatest influences. He was especially drawn to characters like the Golden Age Batman, the Golden Age version of Daredevil, and of course Captain Marvel, known today as Shazam. Even as a child, Newton was fascinated by storytelling through drawing pictures and stuff. The dramatic poses, the exciting action scenes, and larger-than-life heroes found in comic books helped to shape the artistic style he would later become famous for. His work would eventually become known for dynamic figure drawing, detailed backgrounds, and a remarkable ability to blend realism with classic comic book storytelling, much like Neal Adams in a lot of respect. By the 1960s, Don Newton was working as an art teacher in Phoenix, Arizona. At the same time, he worked part-time reviewing artwork that was being submitted to the Master Artist Painting Course, a mail-order art instruction program. Now, I looked online just to see if I could find any old photos of the college that this was done at. Now, I guess you would mail it in and go down to work at a place called the Kakina School of Art in Phoenix, Arizona. The instructor was a gentleman named Jay Datis, and an artist also. So anyway, so I found current photos, and it's a big empty lot right now. But I thought you might be excited to see that. So teaching was not Don's ultimate goal. Like many aspiring comic artists, Newton dreamed of breaking into the comic book industry. During this period, he became heavily involved in comic collecting. This was long before comic book shops became common. Finding older comics in the 60s meant spending weekends searching yard sales, swap meets, flea markets, garage sales, and answering small mail-order advertisement found, believe it or not, in comic books. And I got a couple photos here of some from Marvel Comics. So anyway, doing all that, this hobby eventually connected him with a thing called the Science Fiction and Comics Association, better known as the, clean up here, SFCA. It was started in 1961 by J.B. Love. J.B. Love was a big fan of science fiction in the early days, and so he started this club that eventually started publishing, I don't know, maybe a dozen or so fanzines about science fiction, on movies, TV, comic books, probably novels and stuff. It was all dedicated to all things science fiction, comics, and stuff. The SFCA opened new opportunities for Newton, though. He began contributing artwork to fan publications, most notably Rocket's Blast Comic Collector, often abbreviated as RBCC. Now, some of you older guys like me may have seen some of this stuff floating around in comic stores and stuff. I didn't know what it was back when I saw it. But between 1968 and 1974, Newton produced roughly 24 covers for the magazine. He also created a comic strip called Savage Earth, which he wrote and drew, and probably inked, which appeared regularly in RBCC and became one of its most popular features. In total, Don Newton contributed over 100 pieces of artwork to fanzines and fan publications during this period of time. Just so you know, a lot of people do it, to draw and be happy and participate in these things. But to me, these were not just hobby projects for Don. He was an aspiring artist. For Don Newton, these drawings that he submitted were his audition tape for the big times. Every drawing, every cover, and every comic strip was part of an effort to get noticed by Marvel Comics and DC Comics. The dream, too, that every comic artist would like to work for. Unfortunately, there was a problem. Marvel and DC were both headquartered in New York City. At the time, the publishers often preferred artists who lived closer to their offices. Don Newton was still living in Arizona. I assume Phoenix, because that was the big city back then. Despite his talent, getting noticed from across the country proved to be very difficult. Eventually, Don Newton broadened his search and submitted artwork to Charlton Comics. Well, another one that was probably, I would say, the third biggest one out there at the time. The editor who gave him his first professional opportunity was Nicola Kutai. Newton got a job. Newton's first published comic book work appeared in Ghost Manor number 18 in May 1974. So after years of trying, he was finally a professional comic book artist. Charlton quickly recognized Newton's talent. For the next year and a half, he worked extensively on the publisher's horror titles. And here's a bunch of them right here, including Ghost Manor 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, 48, 50, 64. Did one called Ghostly Haunts, numbers 40, 42, and 43, Ghostly Tales 111, Haunted 17, Haunted Love number 8, Midnight Tales number 11, and The Many Ghosts of Dr. Graves number 45, and many other titles he was working on besides just these few. These were some of the bigger ones. He also painted cover for Charlton's horror and romance books. His painted cover stood out immediately with the editors at Charlton. They thought they were really good looking. So, while many artists of this period focused primarily on line art, Newton demonstrated an impressive skill as a painter, bringing a sense of realism and atmosphere to every cover he produced. Eventually, Charlton trusted him with one of its flagship titles, The Phantom. Beginning with issue number 67 in October 1975, Newton became the primary artist on the series. When he got the series, he made a personal decision about doing his run here. Every Phantom story that he would illustrate on the inside would also feature a painted cover created by him. He would only miss one issue during his run, number 72. One of the highlights came in Phantom number 70. He had a love of the old 1940 classic films, which is where he grew up and watched movies, I guarantee you, caused him to have an inspiration from these films and feature some of his favorite actors and actresses. So drawing inspiration from classic films such as Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, The African Queen, and Key Largo, Newton filled the story of this issue with visual references to Hollywood legends like Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Peter Lorre, Sidney Greenstreet, and Claude Rains. So his final Phantom issue paid tribute to America's bicentennial celebration, Phantom number 74. This cover featured a colonial-era Phantom standing proudly before a 13-star American flag, holding a sword in one hand and a smoking flintlock pistol in the other. Inside the story, the Phantom even encountered Benjamin Franklin. Don would write and draw this book, probably the first time he was writing professionally, I would think. It was exactly the kind of ambitious, imaginative storytelling that made Don Newton's work very special. Don would still contribute work to Charlton later in his career when he was working for DC Comics. He never forgot the company that gave him his start. Throughout his time at Charlton, Newton never lost sight of his larger goal still. He still wanted to work for Marvel and DC Comics. Eventually he did receive several assignments from Marvel. His work included contributions to the Avengers number 203, Interiors. He did Avengers Annual Volume 1, number 9, the Interiors. He did Doc Savage Volume 1, number 7, a measly little ad. Ghost Rider Volume 2, number 23, that's the one with Johnny Blaze. He did the inks only. Giant Size Defenders Volume 1, number 3, he did Interiors. Iron Man Annual Volume 1, number 4, he did a backup story. Savage Sword Conan Volume 1, number 6, he did like a full-page image. And then there was Unknown Worlds, a science fiction Volume 1, number 1, where he actually got to do a cover. And there were several other miscellaneous projects that he had done, but not very many, sadly. But although these assignments showcased his talent, Marvel never seemed fully committed to developing him as one of their major artists. His contributions were often limited, and many fans feel the company never really fully recognized how exceptional his artwork was. Fortunately, another publisher did. That publisher was DC Comics. Newton's first DC assignment appeared in DC Special 28 in 1977, featuring an Aquaman story inked by his longtime friend Dan Atkins. The assignment was successful enough that DC quickly gave him more work featuring the King of Atlantis. Soon afterward, Don Newton became the regular artist on Aquaman Volume 1, number 60 up through 63, when regular artist Jim Aparo would leave the book. These stories allowed Newton to showcase his strengths as a storyteller, his dynamic action scenes, his expressive character work, and detailed underwater environments, which brought a fresh energy to Aquaman's adventures. While his run on the title was relatively brief, it demonstrated that he could handle one of DC classic heroes, and further established him as a dependable artist capable of taking on major assignments. And nearly the same time, he would join Jack Kirby's legendary New Gods series. And he would start on with New Gods Volume 1, right after Jack Kirby left. I think it was a little time afterwards. Number 12, 1977, and would do 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, and 19. New Gods was a major turning point for Don Newton. The quality of Don Newton's artwork impressed DC's editors enough that he was offered a full-time status as a comic book artist. So for the first time, Don Newton was able to leave his teaching career behind as an art teacher and focus entirely on comic book drawing. Although New Gods was eventually canceled, Newton continued working on the characters in backup stories published in Adventure Comics. They would be 459 and 460. DC would also increase the page counts at this time in a lot of their books, up around to 80 pages. He would also take Aquaman into this, for issues 461, 464, 465, and 466. He would also do a New Gods Light Ray story in the DC Special Series number 10 in 1978. Pretty nice stuff. I remember reading that. Around this time period, he also helped launch a science fiction series alongside writer David Michelinie, DC Superstars starring Star Hunters number 16, 1977 was published. He drew it. It was followed by that a comic called Star Hunters Volume 1, Number 1, 1977 also. He only did the first one, the rest of it went to somebody else. His career momentum, though, was growing rapidly. But there was still one dream left to fulfill. During this time, Don would do work in the House of Mystery, number 259, 272, Secrets of Haunted House, number 30, The Brave and the Bold, number 153, 156, and 165. DC Comics Presents number 54, Green Lantern number 148 and 149 and 181, and then a book called Time Warp Science Fiction Dollar Book. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. Vigilante 4, Unexpected 204, and Weird War Tales 82 and 122, to name a few. But with all of this, he so loved Shazam, he went to a convention where the creator and artist C.C. Beck was at. Don would either rent or make a Shazam costume, and here is what happened. Here's a photo of it. So when DC offered him the chance to draw the character, it was the realization of a lifelong dream. He took over the Shazam series with issue number 35. Unfortunately, the title was canceled with that very issue. But there was a silver lining. Newton would continue drawing Captain Marvel in World's Finest Comics for several years afterwards. He would draw them from issues 253 straight through to 270, and then skip one issue, and then 272 to number 281. And readers were treated to some of the finest Captain Marvel artwork of the Bronze Age. Many fans considered these stories among the most faithful visual representations of the character ever published. Newton's affection for Captain Marvel was an obvious thing on every page. He wasn't just drawing a comic book, finally, of his, that he liked. He was drawing his childhood hero, basically. So, as beloved as his Shazam work remains, Don Newton is perhaps best remembered today for his version of Batman. Beginning in 1978, Newton started contributing Batman stories and quickly became one of DC's most dependable artists on the Batman titles. Over the next several years, he produced nearly 80 Batman-related stories and appearances. His work appeared throughout the run, beginning with issue Batman number 305. Now, in the Batman series, he mainly did just backup stories to the main story, and they were usually there to feature characters from the Batman family. And they were short stories, maybe like 10 pages long or so. But he would draw the very first appearance of Jason Todd in number Batman 357. This is before Crisis, too. Here in Batman number 368, Dick Grayson gives Jason Todd the Robin costume to always ensure that Batman will or should have the Robin by his side. You'll find that these remaining issues of Batman I'm showing will have full story artwork instead of doing backups like in the previous issues. Again, DC recognized his ability to produce and appeal to his fans. At around the same time, Don would begin drawing Detective Comics, and he would draw from number 480 through 539. Not all of them near the end, but he drew most of them. These issues would feature the introduction of the pre-crisis Jason Todd has Robin in issue number 526, which was an anniversary issue, and he drew it, and you got to see the pre-crisis Jason Todd has Robin in costume. Newton had an extraordinary ability to draw Batman, let's face it. His version of the Dark Knight I thought was powerful without being exaggerated, realistic without becoming overtly dark. He was heroic without losing the mystery that defines his character. Writers such as Denny O'Neil and Jerry Conway trusted Newton to bring Gotham City to life, and his artwork became a defining visual style of Batman during the late Bronze Age. His run on Detective Comics particularly showcased these abilities. The stories were dramatic, atmospheric, and very beautifully composed. Many fans believe Newton's Batman deserves to be discussed alongside some of the greatest Batman artists in history, and I agree with that. Sadly, Don Newton's career would not last nearly as long as it should have. Throughout 1984, he struggled with ongoing health problems, including a throat ailment that may have contributed to more serious complications later on. And sadly, on August 19, 1984, Don Newton suffered a fatal heart attack. He was only 49 years young. At the time of his death, he had already begun work on Infinity Inc., a series he was scheduled to take over. The 3 issues he worked on, containing his artwork, were published posthumously in 1985. These issues would become some of the final examples of his incredible artwork and talent. Today, Don Newton's artwork continues to be rediscovered by new generations of comic book readers. DC and Marvel have reprinted portions of his work in collected editions, hardcover collections, and trade paperbacks. What you're going to see during this when I'm blabbing on here is some of the covers to a bunch of this stuff. And you can get a lot of this stuff still. As you can see, his work is in quite a few of them. He's still getting the recognition he earned and giving others a chance to enjoy his work. Yet many longtime fans still believe the best way to experience Don Newton's art is in the original comics themselves. Go out and buy the comics. They're not that expensive. Nothing like having the original comic, reading it, taking care of it, and who knows what happens with it later. His storytelling, his page layouts, and attention to detail remain impressive decades later. What makes Don Newton's story especially compelling is that he wasn't a celebrity artist. He wasn't constantly in the spotlight. He simply worked hard. He improved his craft and brought passion to every assignment he received. Whether drawing Batman, Captain Marvel, Shazam, The Phantom, or even the horror and romance books of Charlton, Don Newton always gave the readers his best work. And because of that dedication, his work continues to endure. Don Newton may not always receive the recognition given to some of the industry's biggest names, but his contributions to comic books remain significant. So from a young boy drawing comic books in Arizona to becoming one of DC's most respected artists, his journey is a reminder that talent, persistence, and passion can leave a lasting mark in comic book history. If you've never explored Don Newton's work, I highly recommend you seek it out. You might discover one of the comic book's greatest hidden treasure, his artwork. And anyway, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with fellow comic fans. And until next time, keep reading comics and celebrating the creators who brought these incredible worlds to life. Thank you again for watching. Until next time, take care.